Hello, everyone. My name is Priyanka, and I will be your moderator today. Some quick housekeeping tips before we begin. We will not have the chat function open during this webinar. You can send your questions in via Q&A, and I will be posing them to the panelists at the end of our conversation, which will be approximately an hour from now. If we drop out, please do try and sign back in. We will be trying from our end as well. But let's hope the planets are aligned for us today and we don't have any technical issues. The panelists today are Sulini Nair, Padma Menon, and Sean Pereira. You already have their bios, so I will be very brief in my introductions. Padma Menon is a dancer and philosopher who is a pioneer in offering dance as a contemplative practice of self-inquiry. She has been teaching for nearly 4 decades and currently runs Moving Archetypes, through which she works with people from all over the world via online programs. Sulini Nair is an eminent dancer, dance researcher, and a close associate of Padma for many years. Sean Pereira holds a PhD in science communication from ANU and researches how people communicate across cultural barriers. He has an abiding interest in Indian philosophy and traditions. I will now hand over to Padma to start the conversation.
Thank you, Priyanka. Welcome, everyone. And I want to welcome Sean and Sulini, especially, and to all of you that are going to watch this now with us live, or if you're watching the recording, from my heart, I welcome all of you. This is a privilege and an honor to be here with the people that I'm here on this webinar with. I want to thank Priyanka. Priyanka is in my classes, and she's also an extremely accomplished woman in her own right. She runs her own consulting firm. So Priyanka is always, when she's here, I'm quite confident of things going okay. So thank you, Priyanka. I would like to begin, as we're going to be talking about dance, which actually is a kind of a paradoxical thing to do, because we dance because there are things that we can't talk about. So to talk about dance is always a rather challenging thing. So I'm going to invite all of you to join me in a very simple embodied practice. And I'm doing this because I really think that this will help you to receive this information, to receive this talk and these reflections with a very different consciousness, because it requires a kind of heartfelt reception, not a sense-making reception by the mind. And these little preparatory practices, which I do in my classes as well, always helps us to shift up the consciousness of our body and to come into a slightly different attention, what is called Shraddha in this tradition, which is like that passionate and feelingful attention. So please join me. I'm going to stand up, and you can do this either standing up or sitting down, but standing is a bit better. So I hope you can still see me. I'm behind the chair. But the first thing we're going to do is to connect with the earth. And so we think of our hips as being filled with water, the pot, and we drop those hips. It's not simply putting a weight into the feet, but we want to feel this pot of water in the hips, and we place the pot down. So the hips weigh us down. We connect to the earth through the feet, and we can move around. We don't have to be rigid and controlled. We can smooth that weight around. We can loosen up the hips. And then let's close our eyes. And that immediately brings us to an intimacy to the body. And what if we consider that when we close our eyes, it's not that we are not seeing anything, but we actually see this darkness behind our eyes. And let's breathe, but not mechanically. Breathe with the scent. What can you smell or scent around you? So we're still keeping the connection to earth. We're seeing the darkness, and we bring the scent. Can we smell our own skin? What else is around us? So not mechanical breathing, but breathing to scent. What do we taste in our mouth? Really attending to the taste in the mouth. And you will notice that when you smell, the taste can change in the mouth. And still keeping that connection. And now, what are we touching? We are touching the earth through the feet, because we are putting our weight through the feet. So becoming aware that we're not simply mechanically standing, but we are touching the earth with our feet. And we can play with the different parts of the foot as we do in dance. The ball of the foot feels different to the heel, to the toe. And sometimes when you touch with the foot, you can feel that sensation going all the way up your body. So really attending the touch, the scent, the taste. And now listen to all the sounds, my voice, but anything else, choicelessly. And then can we just bring an element of enjoyment? Can we enjoy the senses? Just that velvety darkness in front of our eyes, the scent. What a miracle that we have this body that's capable of being multisensorial. And what is this universe of taste and touch and scent and sound, and this darkness that can bring everything together? There's no separation. Even our bodies can be vast in this darkness. And just gently, you can open the eyes and start with just looking down to the side, spreading the gaze, and then coming up. And my invitation is, try and keep that multisensoriality in your bodies and listen with that body, not with the mind. So I just want to say a couple of things, a bit of setting the scene. So I just ask for your patience while I'm going to speak for a couple of minutes or more, just to set the scene. What is this dance we are speaking about? I want to start with something personal, the story of dance in my own life. I started dancing when I was very young. At the age of 9, I was performing professionally. And by the time I was in my late teens, I had done pretty much what every professional dancer in India aspires to do. I performed in all the major venues. I had been reviewed by all the major critics. And then suddenly, when I thought I was a star, everything fell apart, because my mother, who was really responsible for promoting me, managing my career, she just decided that it's time to stop the dancing and to, do what proper girls should do, is to get married and settled. And so the dance just disappeared. And I found that there was this emptiness in my life. And I soon realized it wasn't the performances that I missed. It wasn't any of that. But there was something else that the dance was, which I didn't know what it was at the time, that felt like I had been robbed of something really deep within me, something that was my essence. And then I moved to Australia in an arranged marriage. That didn't work out, but the dancing career happened. But all through that time, I was searching for, what is it that I sensed in my teacher's presence as I was studying. I sensed as a young person, because as a young person, you're so much more open and so much more permeable. And that, in fact, I lost when it all became a career and a profession. And so in the search, I left Indian dance for a long time. I studied contemporary dance. I studied Boot. I studied a lot of other things, worked as a contemporary choreographer. And then it was when I was in the Netherlands that the penny began to drop. And I began to realize that immanent in the dance is its spirituality, is the divinity. The dance itself held the wisdom, that it had nothing to do with performing or anything. It didn't have to do with the story. It was the dancing itself that held the intelligence and the wisdom. And when I look at my life, dance has been at the center of my meaning making. It has not been something that I do to escape from trouble. It has been the center of how I navigate that trouble, and not in a way of a nice sort of diversion or keeping me happy, but actually giving me the intelligence of what should I do? How should I perceive this? In a way that no other system gives me. It doesn't matter what philosophies there are and what discourses there are, but I have been able to do certain unusual things to do, and they're not radically big acts, but what matters is the small things you can do to navigate in a way that you can keep your integrity in your life. And that is what dance has been to me. And that is why I'm so passionate about offering this practice. So then let me zoom out a little bit and speak about what is this dance. I was listening to the astrologer and Jungian psychoanalyst Heather Ainsworth this morning, and she had this beautiful, succinct video about the movement of consciousness. So there are different ways in which we can look at the evolution of history, humankind, the world, cosmos, and astrology, astronomy, has been a very ancient wisdom in many different cultures. And dance, by the way, is very intimately related to astrology. So if you can, in many of the astrological traditions, including the Indian, they consider the movement in terms of the movement of consciousness. What changes in the consciousness of the cosmos, in our consciousness? And there is a proposition that 5,000 years ago, it was if you look at Western astrology, it was the age of Taurus, and it was the time of the divine feminine, where the body was the center, where we spoke about the divine that was immanent and not transcendent. And this dancing really carries the scent of those traditions, of that wisdom and of that intelligence. And here we are now, whether we believe in astrology or not, at least we can say that we are living in times of great, a mechanistic way of living, a mind-dominated way, and the greatest violence is the separation from the body and the intelligence of the body, which then separates us from everything else, from earth and from all other life. So what do we do? Talking about it is not going to help, because that's still in the mind, analyzing and talking. And then here is this precious intelligence coming with the scent and with the wisdom and with the memory of the bodies of these women who did this at so many thousands of years ago, who simply did this practice, not just for their own benefit, for the benefit of anybody who came with an open heart to be part of their ritual dance. So that is this dance. And how is this dance different from other kinds of dancing? There are so many different kinds of dancing. People dance for all kinds of purposes, and all of that is beautiful and meaningful. But in this dance, there's a lot to speak about. But if I speak about the constellation of dance, what are the different dimensions of dance? Maybe there are three important things I would like to share. One is that the dance embraces all of our feelings and sensations and our emotions. To what end? It is to be offered as an offering. It is to be expressed, manifested, and brought into form. So it's not an interior inquiry. It is an expression. And therefore, the importance of that artistic, creative. It is about beauty. It is about wonder. It is about pleasure. It's not a cathartic process. Even when we are speaking about the difficult emotions or expressing the difficult emotions, it is still in that realm of beauty and wonder. And it also has archetypes, the ritual, the deities, which are an integral aspect. And the essence is actually the word rasa, which means essence. And rasa is taste. So this comes from the world of kitchen, women cooking. And the word is when you add a lot of spices into the cooking, and then you have this beautiful dish that you make, or a curry, and the taste of that is rasa, the taste. And the taste is not the sum of its parts. It is something other, because there is an alchemical process of cooking. And that's exactly what we do in the dance. We put all of these things together and we cook it. We can't control the taste. The taste will be what it is, and it will be different each time. But that is the essence of, we taste the essence of this offering. So that is a little bit about the dancing. And I think I've said enough. So Sean, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you, Padma. And it's a joy and a privilege to be back in the webinar with you once again, and Sulini as well.
Thank you.
That was a mouth-watering introduction that you shared about food and spices and cooking and coming together. And I really appreciated the personal narrative that you shared with us about how this journey of dance is beyond that of the template of mind and language, and moving into a space of inquiry that goes beyond that. And I think that's a beautiful analogy that you brought with the cooking pot and all those spices. There is no control in that space, how they interact. I enjoy cooking, and I refuse to cook in an oven because I feel that I can't control what's going on in an oven. I enjoy stovetop cooking as a result. So I did identify very strongly with what you said. But I just want to inquire, Sulini, do you have personal stories that connect you to dance in this way, particularly beyond the template of language and understanding it as we see from the mind space?
Yeah, I would like to begin with something. My first sort of, encounter with dance is something beyond an art form, something beyond performance, something beyond a skill that you master to express or something. I was just 13 and I was learning with a teacher. And up until then, it was just learning an art form. It was just learning a technique. And though we know implicitly that Indian dance is spiritual and it has spiritual moorings and everything, mostly we just think of it as because it has been practiced for centuries in temples, and it deals with gods, goddesses and all. But this particular day when I was dancing, and I was just a 13-year-old, and I was doing a small piece where it was on Krishna, who's a very popular god in Indian mythology. And so this devotee was longing for Krishna and searching for him, looking for him, but he was not to be found. So in dance, how we would do that was we would take a circle, and the circle is the process of searching everywhere. And then at the end of the searching, the devotee comes back and realizes that she can never find him. He's not there. And this is what I was doing. And I remember my teacher telling me when I did this a couple of times, she said, you know what's missing? When you go searching for Krishna and you take the circle and you come back, ideally you should have 2 drops of unshed tears in your eyes. Now, as a 13-year-old, this was something totally beyond my understanding, because for me, it was, learning steps, learning the technique, learning the story and expressing that. And how am I going to bring unshed tears to my eyes, or something totally that baffled me at that time. But at that moment, I realized that there's something very profound about what I was trying to do. And it is something still much beyond my reach at that point. But this thing stayed with me. I've forgotten the steps, I've forgotten what dance I was doing then. But this lesson, this little suggestion stayed with me. But it again went back to, dance being about performance, dance being about learning the style and various styles over the years and everything. And later when I went to Padma, that was the big insight that I got, because we had just met and we thought we'll just do this little production for the inauguration of a dance school in India. And we were working on this production. And at one point she told me, I was working on something very abstract. So she said, okay, take this particular emotion or a state of being and give me 3-4 movements for it. And it was the first time and she told me, no using your face, no using your hands, no hand gestures. These are the things that we use mostly in Indian dance, face for expressions and lots of hand gestures. She said, cut both out. With the body, I want you to show me some movements that would express what you're talking about expressing. That time, when I put those movements out there, I realized that this was a revelation to me. It was like opening a new door. The rest of the body you just use mechanically most of the time, even when you're performing, but the body holds so much. It holds such power to express. And while I put those movements out there, I also realized another thing, which was more interesting, that these movements were in turn telling me things. It was clarifying that emotion more and more for me, a deeper clarity about what these emotions were. Then I knew that the body has a certain wisdom of its own. There is an intelligence of the body, which we are totally missing. Even as dancers, when we use the body all our lives, we will miss it if we are not perceptive to it. So that was a huge learning for me. And from then, it has been looking at dance through that lens. And that's a whole different way of approaching dance. So I don't remember what it is that you asked me. I just got carried away, as happens always. Yeah, but I think that was how I realized that, this is a discipline which is far beyond just a dance, just an art form, and something which is meant to be a spectacle for entertainment. Or there is some richness there which can add to your understanding of your own self, understanding of your life, of reality. So that was the beginning of dance as a spiritual quest for me.
And similarly with what you said, I mean, a keyword that emerged from that, the narrative which you shared of your personal story and that searching, that seeking for Krishna, the divine, the inquiry that you spoke about, it was emotion that played an important role in that space. You spoke about emotion, your teacher asking you to cry, and then finding out.
Not really, yeah, I think it was a trigger to awaken that bhava. Bhava is what you call feeling. You do that with an immense amount of feeling. It's not just about crying. It's to bring that whole feeling into that moment where it's about seeking, isn't it? It's about a path, it's about seeking. And you don't find it. So what is the emotion there? It's a sense of loss. It's a sense of, anguish. So you can't just act that. You've got to really feel it. You've got to live that emotion. So that was the suggestion.
I mean, Padma, the classes that I have attended, you speak about really sort of embodying those processes, those emotions that come in. I remember one thing that really I never forget is the stamba that you, the constellation, the movement that you said, and to be like a pillar, and that fear, that fright that comes in that space. I'm wondering, I mean, when we practice other forms of spiritual inquiry, there is this tendency of withdrawal of the senses. Whereas here, it's embracing the senses. And like Surini was saying, not only embracing, but using those senses, those emotions, to communicate a message, not for performance, but to, I don't know the correct word, but it's something to take it out. Is this what you mean by the body or the kshetra that you speak about?
So, Sean, it's so interesting to listen to Sulini, because, this yearning, which is so central to spiritual inquiry, we all yearn, right? I mean, it's not just spiritual inquiry. It's if you say what is one essence of our human emotion, it's this yearning. We are yearning, and then we translate this yearning into ambition, into the next holiday, into another relationship, all sorts of things. And yet this yearning persists. And sometimes we turn that yearning into spiritual quests. But we always think that the yearning has to be ended. But the thing is that the yearning is the divine. The yearning is eternal. And this dance is really that yearning. It's the expression of that yearning. And that yearning has all the other emotions in it: desire, fear, wonder, disgust. All that comes in with this yearning. And so, there's a lot. In fact, I'm doing a course on yearning right now, and I know I'm tangential to what you're asking me, but I'm in a way using that yearning as an example. It's so what when we say the word yearning, we have lots of stories about yearning. Yearning is this, yearning is that, most of the time. And when you speak about many mainstream philosophies that ask us to turn from our emotions, well, most of them say yearning or desire is bad, that we shouldn't yearn, we shouldn't desire, that, in fact, desire is the villain in almost all major philosophies. And yet in dance, we are saying turn to the yearning, express the yearning in the most beauteous and passionate way possible, because it is the yearning that connects you to the yearning of the flower for the bee, the yearning of the tree for the sky. There's yearning everywhere around us. And the whole of the cosmos of reality is a feelingful expression. So the word bhava that Sulini said, it's a beautiful word because it's not just feeling, but it is inherent in the word is expression. It is expression of feeling. That feeling is something that is expressed. Otherwise, it's not a feeling. And so everything in nature is nature's expression. It is, when you see the tree, this kind, this earth that we have is the expression of the earth. It is the expression of the feelingfulness and the intelligence of the earth. And so when we express our yearning or our feelings, we become part of that emotion around us. Everything becomes emotional. The earth is not just some kind of inert, material thing that you can exploit and do, but it's emotional, like our bodies are emotional. And the sky, we have astrology that puts our stories up in the heavens, and it's to see that connection. So when the ancient word for the body was kshetra, which is the word you use, Sean, and kshetra is I think Sulini, you were saying yesterday, the site of experience, the field of experience. So it's not just the body that is defined biologically. It is where is the site. We can choose where the site of experience is. But when we come into the body, that brings us immediately to the body of the earth, the cosmos, everything. But we have to land in the body. When we are distant, when we are talking about transcendence all the time, when we locate the divine and everything remotely, our experience is also very remote. It's not intimate and it's not visceral. So there is an intimacy in dance that returns us to the body. And maybe at this time, I just want to share, just because we're talking about yearning, and how does, maybe for people that are listening to it, for example, how does dance consider yearning? There are beautiful practices of yearning. So a couple of simple practices. One is, there's a movement of the swing in dance. I think I'll put the chair aside. So there's a movement of the swing, which is, you pull the swing back and then let the swing go. Your body will go. So your weight, if you just allow the weight, it's like you pull it back and the weight pulls you forward. This is that yearning. When you turn to the yearning completely, you turn towards it, you celebrate it, you honor it, and then it will express you out in the world in this beautiful way. So here, and then the other practice of yearning is like the ancient dancers or the apsaras. They were mistresses of yearning. They just, that was their, what can I say, their special skill is this expression of yearning. And they're supposed to be people that know how to ride a chariot, the chariot of yearning. And it's the same movement of the chariot, it's that same kind of takenness. You return to the way and you're taken by that. So this is how this is how the philosophy of life, or how do you encounter these feelings and sensations? What does the dance reveal to you about how you can be in it and how you can, more importantly, how you can express it? That's a very long answer to your question.
But a very, very informed, very, very relevant answer, nevertheless. One thing that I heard from what you were saying was the connectedness to the earth. And the symbolism of the swing comes from the cycles of the earth, the feminine space of the earth, the cycles that happen in the female body, and so forth. One important term that is now used quite a lot, maybe I have heard it recently, others may have heard it before, is this concept of eco-awakening, where it's like you said before, being connected, but it's not realizing that your connectedness is inferior from something above you, the heavens that lay above you, but your connectedness with the earth. And therefore, your first responsibility our first responsibility as humans is to the earth rather than the beings or the sky or the heaven. And again, this idea of the yearning that you speak about, it comes from a place of wildness, sort of untamedness as well. Yearning is yearning is looked down upon in terms of uncontrolled behavior, for that matter. So I'm quite interested when we speak about yearning. How do you sort of see it with seeking? Because yearning as opposed to seeking in spirituality, because we seek for spiritual awakening, whereas in yearning, do they work together? I'm just curious.
Isn't spiritual seeking all about yearning? I don't see how they are different. In spiritual seeking, there's always yearning, isn't it? Even if you are thinking of God as something, presence that's beyond, you yearn for that. Even if you seek God as immanent, you still yearn. So I think the yearning is at the heart of spiritual seeking, is what I think. And I also remember, Padma, we were working on these karanas, movement constellations that they hold parts of that entire philosophy. There are 108 karanas, and usually these are danced as decorative pieces in dances. But we wanted to see what is in them, and we started doing exploration based on these karanas. And there was a very simple karana, which when we read what it was about, it was just holding your hands like this. And I've seen this karana danced, and it is held in a very upright position. Your shoulders are held back, your head is upright, and then you are doing footwork. So this is what I have seen it. But when we read this, she said, hold your hands in such a way that there is no gap between your palms. And then she said, in the book, it said, raise your shoulders, look up. Your neck has to be at this level, and your arms are clasped to your chest with no gap between the palms. The moment you take this position, it brings a certain emotion in the body, which is very different from holding your hand very aesthetically like this. Your head is upright, shoulders thrown back. It brings a whole lot of emotions into the body. And that is, at the heart of it, is all about yearning. It is just yearning. And then the next one was about, you see how this philosophy is going. The next one was about dropping your arms like garlands just hanging. You're just standing there. At the end of it, you have to do these to, sort of really feel these emotions in the body. Your arms are just hanging like garlands. There's no weight in the hands. It's limp. And after this yearning, there's a certain state of your being, when you're in that state, you just surrender. You just drop everything and you're just there. It's just your presence. And that's an offering. So what we found when we went through these constellations was that they were not just decorative pieces. They held a lot of a lot of ideas in them, a lot of feeling there, a lot of teaching there within those movement constellations. But you can get to them only through the body. You cannot get to them if you just learn them like a technique, or if you read, the technique of the book. You can only do them in your body and be perceptive to what that movement is trying to tell you. And then you realize that there's a lot to be unearthed from these things. These are coded forms of some philosophy. You see that, they're not just dances. There's something coded in each of these constellations. And you realize also that this yearning, this seeking is at the core of that. So I don't think they are two different things. And wild and, in a certain way, maybe when you look at it physically and, if your yearning is directed towards the world, and that may be a different way. But when you turn it within, that itself is the seeking.
That's an interesting, it really turns on the head my understanding of seeking and yearning, and the way you interrelated the two. The fact that the yearning sits within the body and it drives the seeking. So spiritual seeking comes from this place of physical yearning from the body. So I have heard this term being used, and we've spoken about it as well, about a dance as a body-led practice. It's a body-led form of spiritual inquiry, which contradicts with certain practices I myself follow, which is mind-led. In a certain sense, it's more comfortable. It's more comfortable, a mind-led practice, because it's more controllable, whereas the body, again, this uncontrolled yearning which sits there. So, when we speak about dance as a spiritual inquiry, so is it, does it contradict, or so how do we go ahead with a body-led practice in this space? That is my question. How could we sort of relegate the seeking to the body? Because we always underestimate the body, don't we? We think the mind has to control the body. The body is inferior. So how do we reconcile and let the body take control?
Well, it's, when this yearning, it's, when we say there's a wildness, wildness for us is a bad thing, because we're all civilized, aren't we?
Yeah.
And look at where civilization has got us. But anyway, we consider ourselves progressed and civilized beyond all the people who lived, 5,000, 10,000 years ago. And yet this wisdom, comes from those times. But nevertheless, it's very interesting that the ancient dancers, they actually danced in caves in the forest. So there was this thing of leaving the village and going into the forest. And, many performances, the most ancient ones, were held in caves. And there is, if I look at some of the traditional pieces that I do, even what I learned from my teacher, it's very interesting. There is a story of an elephant, Gajendra, who gets caught, his leg gets caught in the jaws of a crocodile. And, this, again, if I show it, it's this whole movement of this push and pull of yearning again. So the crocodile is pulling one way, then Gajendra is pulling the other way. So he's getting pulled this way, getting pulled that way. The crocodile is pulling. So there's this pulling, pushing, pulling, pushing of this thing going on, which is what really our life is. And then finally the elephant decides that the only way, there's no point in trying to keep doing this. And the elephant decides to offer a lotus. Here's the offering, a beautiful offering to Vishnu. And it's, then Vishnu comes down and liberates him from the crocodile. But so here's this, what is in this push and pull, you make your yearning something beauteous, something beauteous to the divine. And that's that moment of liberation. But this whole thing is encased, this whole story in the dance is longer than the story, is the dancing about the forest. Where is the forest that this elephant was? The scent of line after line is about the scent of the forest, the flowers of the forest, the scent, the sound of the frogs, the deer, the peacock. And the forest is the multisensorial body. Because when you're in the forest, it's like you close your eyes, nighttime, the forest. These were not just, there's so many layers to this. It's real in the sense of a context. Many of these performances happened at night, but it's also that the night brings you into a very different experience of your body. You, like we just did, you close your eyes and you suddenly get very intimate with your body. You have to, if you're walking in the dark or if you're walking in the forest, you have to be very multisensorial. You have to be, there are all the smells in the forest, you're listening for the birds, and you're not just striding through the forest, you're careful because you don't know what's going to happen. There's a very different, the body becomes much more important than the mind, because you have to be that multi-focused awareness of the body. And so that is like the soil for the practice. You awaken the multisensorial body. And in that body, the yearning becomes something that is cosmic and intimate in the same moment. It's not just my yearning to have the next great job, but it's my yearning, which is the yearning of this elephant asking for, for liberation. It's the yearning of the bird song at dusk. So you just become, and it's, I can say these things, but when you do it, you really, that's what happens. That is the unity that happens. The union of sensations.
It's quite different from this mind-led thing that Sean was talking about, isn't it? Because then you just shut off the body there. And there's so much that you're not using, so much that is being lost there because you judge that this is something that's inferior, that's not good enough, and then you just push it aside. But there's so much wisdom there. So how do we, I think it's not about, mind versus body. It's about this, a philosophy of the whole thing being integrated in your, in your quest or in your evolution or your journey. I think also this, you were talking about this video of this, the age of the Taurus and all that. So it was also said, that it's with these patriarchal spiritual systems that you have this disconnection from the body and everything being off the mind. But also, funnily, it's the aim there to also is to dissolve the mind. So I think it's all, and not to say it doesn't work, it does. But I think mind, body, everything coming together into a harmonious whole is holistic. It's integrated. There's no need to fragment yourself and you say that this is the noble part of me and this is the ignoble part of me. There's no such thing. And that's what this philosophy says. The body is beautiful. The body is a site of knowledge. The body is a site of expression. And, and it's for this expression that people came and sat and they shared in this experience. And experience is can be shared only through the body, isn't it? Through what the body expresses.
That's absolutely right. I mean, going back to the point that I was talking about earlier about realizing and coming into connection with the earth, many initiation rituals that First Nation communities, cultures that are really connected with the soil relied on going into the wilderness, and particularly in the night, spending nighttime in the wilderness. And it's about that intimacy, that connection with that space. And in that space, the mind is quite feeble. It's enfeebled because it can't rationalize noises. It can't sort of. It's fearful as well because it doesn't have its regular frameworks on which to defend itself. But I think that shift that happens in that space, that awakening, that shift in consciousness that happens in that space is something that, correct me if I'm wrong, is something that is desired or the yearning of dancing allows to happen because you shift from that mind-led paradigm to a body-led paradigm. And like Surini says, not that the body therefore subjugates the mind, instead they work together. And that is those intersectional spaces, of course, which we'll talk another time. But what you're saying is you come to a complete situation of consciousness, a change in consciousness, a shift in consciousness, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, the place where rasa exists. Now I'm trying to get my head around where the location of rasa is in this space.
I would like to just talk about one session that Padma and I did together. We were exploring Rudra. Rudra is the ancient form of Shiva. And so I had read this little bit about Rudra, which said the poem which said that Rudra is both fierce and he's most benevolent. He's as sharp as a sharp arrow that races through the air, but he's also the bow that retreats. And he's also shrinking. At the same time, he's expanding. And he's both fire, he's water. So these are all very contradictory terms. So when the mind tries to grasp something like this, you read this and you try to understand what is Rudra, you have there's a certain limit to which you go, and then you judge. These are polarities. So what is this? What is all this? It doesn't really make sense beyond that. Okay, you may perhaps, just reproduce that. You read this and you say, okay, this is Rudra. But what's your understanding basically? But when we put it into the body, we were doing this session, and then Padma said, okay, express what it means to shrink. Okay, you shrink in the body. Express what it means to expand infinitely in the body. Then express what it means to, be like an arrow that cuts through the air. Express what it means to be a bow that retreats. So they are all very different energies. So you put them all in the body, you realize that there's a whole different universe that opens up in the body. You express fire, it's a different kind of energy. You express water, it's a very different flowing kind of energy. At the end of all of this, you finish, manifesting all these different energies in the body, and you're left with something. When you finish this, what you're left with is a different level of consciousness, which is so different from what you were before you started this process. And what I then realized, I was just looking through those notes, and I realized that there's one word that talks about Rudra, it's achintya, beyond thought. Beyond thought. And then you realize you're trying to understand something which is beyond thought with your mind, which is just a collection of thoughts. How is that going to work? And when we talk about a spiritual quest, every time we find that Brahman cannot be described, it's beyond thought. How are we trying to sort of read and write papers and analyze all this with the mind? But when you put this into the body, there's an understanding of these polarities. You're able to hold these polarities at the same time. Your mind has no role there, but you experience these different energy states in your body. You actually understand at a physical level, at a very deep level, what this complexity is, which you cannot understand when you read that book, that this is fire, this is also water. But when you put it in your body, you know. And it's not a knowing that you can sit and express to describe to somebody. But if you were to do it, you would know too. So there, that body is the site of learning. It's not the mind. You learn through the sensations, through these energies, through the shifts in these energies. And you're able to touch a different consciousness through that. And you also realize another thing. In this whole process, the mind does not disturb. The mind quietly moves away from this equation, which is what you're aiming for, isn't it? When you talk about a spiritual quest, you are in direct confrontation with the mind, how to still the mind, how to silence the mind, how to stop the flow of thoughts. You're sitting on that seat and you're battling with the mind. But when you're doing this, you're completely absorbed in your being and there is no mind there to disturb you.
Yeah. And so, Sean, that is rasa. So the rasa of Rudra, that's it. And it's that essence. It's like that cooking. You put everything into the pot, and then what's the taste? It's the essence of everything you've put in. And you cook it, you move it, you cook it, and then you taste it. Now that taste is a very ephemeral. You can't hold on to that taste. You taste it. It's there in that moment, you taste it. But that taste brings you an intelligence about possibilities, the infinite possibilities. And, so what is the purpose? Is it, it's lovely to have the rasa, but it has an absolutely urgent purpose, particularly in the times we live in, because we have had this long period of very mechanistic living where we very linear, cause and effect, label, define, separate, fragment. But we speak all the time about, how do we deal with complexity? What is the unifying discourse? How do we bring things together? It's not going to happen through the words and it's not going to happen through the mind, because the very nature of the mind is to divide and fragment. That is its strength, and it's very good at that. And there are times we need that. But the body is completely capable of multidimensionality. It's capable of plurality. It's capable of holding that polarities in the same moment, of holding complexity. So that complexity, that intelligence of complexity is entirely something that is body-led. And, I feel like we have so little value for dance in the times we live in. We think, dance is just entertainment and it's very nice to have. It's not taken seriously. Where is dance at the table of, where people are talking about important things? talking about, what is required. You don't see dance at the table. You don't even see arts at the table. And among the arts, dance is probably the poorest. And yet, this is the intelligence. These women who danced and these people who danced, they held a really sharp, sophisticated intelligence about the nature of reality.
And that's the fact that you spoke about that dance does not have space at the table, and the fact that sort of the mind-led paradigms dominate the table or sit at the table exclusively, one could say. That's quite a good picture that you create there, and not to sort of re-throw a quote that you share quite often, Padma, from J. Krishnamurti. It's about freedom from the known that you're speaking about moving from those known spaces. And recently I heard you on the Open Deep podcast, and where it was spoken about this point that you just shared, that it's an ephemeral, it's a short-lasting space. It keeps changing. So the perpetual genesis was a term that was used there. And that captivated me because it's something that we can't hold on to. It's something that is always changing. And I think that is a conflict with the mind, because the mind not only divides and conquers, but it also possesses. It holds on to, it commits to memory, and uses it. And I use the word uses it purposefully, because once it's part of the mind, it's given a label and a name, it's specified and put in a box. It's there for a purpose. It's not there to be. So as I could see, there's a conflict with the mind and the body. And I mean, I appreciate what you said, Sulini, before, that there's this coexistence and there's this intersectional space that exists. But there is a conflict. We have to see that conflict for what it is, and the manifestations that are happening with that conflict. So in terms of moving forward and bringing dance to the table, at least into the same room that the table is in, what could we do in terms of moving forward?
I think we could. Yeah,
Yes,
I think we need to relook at what we think about these physical body-led practices. We need to relook at our definitions of what dance is, at least in the Indian dance context, where all these things are laid down. And even as dancers, not just as, just general, those who are interested in arts or in spirituality, I think even as dancers, because so much of dancing is just illustrative. I don't know if I have the time, but I can keep going on about this. I'll tell you. The difference between, dance being illustrative and dance being a felt, a lived thing. And we were working on this production, and again, it was about the earth, and I was dancing the forest fires. And so as usual, Padma said, come up with movements for fire. The first instinct is to use the hand gesture. In dance, we have hand gestures to depict the fire. The one thing she immediately said was, please don't illustrate it, be it. That was a shock, it just hit me. It's so easy to hide behind these things, these tools that we have. The gesture is a tool, the facial expression is a tool. It's easy to hide behind that. The real thing is hidden, they are all symbolic, actually. They're not the things. And then she said, cut it out, just be it. And so then you go back and you start doing the real work. What does it feel in the body? What is the quality of fire? How do you bring that in the body? You don't want to illustrate fire. You want to be fire. What is the energy? That unpredictability, that, the fierceness of fire, the all-consuming nature of fire. Then the expression is totally different. So instead of looking at dance as something illustrative, something from the practitioner's side, and from the spectator's side as something just beautiful and, something nice to do on a weekend, go and watch a dance performance. Beyond all of that, if we can see dance as a way in which we can connect with our own selves, as a way in which we can come into harmony with our integrated being, I think to see dance like that, to approach it like that, I think it would really help to maybe come into that room, maybe stand at the door.
So, Sean, absolutely what Sulini said. But, I was going back to where we think of these thousands of years. We look at the history of what's happened 5,000 years ago. And for the last 5,000 years, we've been in a very mind-dominated kind of way of living. And then, people talk about, oh, there's going to be a change. And, what are we going to do, though? We are alive here now. And, if somebody tells me in another 1,000 years, we will have the divine feminine, it offers me no comfort. I am here with my life. We are here living our lives now. And I feel like this is an intimate practice, rasa, coming from the cooking in the kitchen. You don't need to perform it. You don't need to have audiences. In fact, even not so long ago in India, I have seen ritual dancers just do it when there's nobody there. They would spend more than half a day getting ready, and then come evening and there was no one there. And they said, well, we're not doing it for the audience. We are doing it. This is our offering. So each one of us can do that. That freedom to be that beauteous expression, that expression of beauty, no matter whether it's fear or anger or whatever it is, but in our expression of it, we can do that with beauty and wonder, because that's that creativity. That is unconditional freedom. We don't need anybody's permission. We don't need to wait for the ages to change, or we can change the stars in the heaven, maybe. If we start doing, of course they will, because everything responds to everything else. And so there is no determinism about all this. And I feel like, this is something that, especially this role of something that is artistic, creative, that freedom to express beauty, that is always in us. We don't even in the most, and this is not an escape. We can express our poignancy with beauty. We can express that yearning with beauty, that fear with beauty, and come into the presence of these archetypes, because they are holding those emotions, and they allow us to connect with that more expansive movements of those emotions. It's turning to those emotions into their more rather than holding it as my fear and my story around it, and it's bad and now I have to find the courage. It's just going into that archetypal dimension, that's what these rituals were about. And Socrates speaks about an examined life, and he says, everybody knows that saying, an unexamined life is not worthy of living, something like that, he said. The dance was that. It was a way of moving, expressing an examined life. It was not examining with the head and analyzing, but it was life is for living, isn't it? It's for expressing, it's for acting, it's for doing, manifesting. So what does that look like when you express that examined life as an offering? And that is that beauteous expression of dance. So it's an absolutely everyday practice for everybody, whether you know dance or you don't know. And I know all these words we use, the minute you say dance, the minute you say artistry, it becomes these ivory tower words. Oh, I'm not a dancer, you have to be perfect, and I'm not an artist, that is somebody special. It's not. We are all capable of this kind of dance, and we're all capable of an artistic intelligence. It's not random. The other way of disrespecting artistry is to say, oh, anybody can do it. There is an intelligence. You need to kind of really recognize and learn how to perceive that intelligence, but it's definitely not only for some people either.
That definitely sets a framework in terms of how we should see ourselves in this time, because I too was watching the video that you shared about the changes of the cycles, the astrological cycles, and definitely, we do have those messages that are happening around us, and embracing this and then moving forward is something that, particularly with what Sulini said, I really liked the Rudra analogy that you shared about how you could be hot and cold, water and fire at the same time. It's a space that the mind can't handle. Mind can't handle it. And recently, I was reading this scientific article that said that scientifically they say this when you could subdue this particular part of the brain known as the medial frontopedal network, commonly known as the default mode network. That is the place where they locate this shifting consciousness, because that part of the brain controls our ego, our mind. And so Achinta, as you were talking about before, is moving into that space beyond it. And that offers those glimpses of rasa and that connection that you were talking about, that shift in consciousness. So I think there is hope and there is a way that we could move forward. And I use the word move because it is an action that we need to be doing rather than thinking about moving forward.
Yes. I was just wondering, Priyanka, maybe it's we can open up for some questions.
Yes, so I'd like to invite everyone to please pop any questions you have in the Q&A box. It's just at the bottom of your screen. So if you put those in there, we can start, the panelists can start addressing those. But I might actually start because obviously I have a few of my own. But, I think one thing that's become really clear for me from this discussion is that this erosion that's happened over time of, going from, like, especially in spirituality, where it's almost become this mind-dominated quest for, knowledge and understanding. How did we lose that body-led spiritual practice? Because I know it's still a part, like, there's still pilgrimages in India people do, and part of it is to to have that physical endurance, like, climb the mountain or roll somewhere. So there's definitely that understanding that there has to be a body-led experience. But why has dance sort of disappeared from that equation? Because, we're still doing the mantras and, the rote learning, but, dancing, which, like Sulini mentioned, just your hand and that posture, when it brings you, it connects you to that understanding of something bigger than you. Where do you think the breakdown has happened?
Well, I mean, I think we'll put we've been talking about Heather Ensworth, and I will put a link to, when we email out a link to her video, because she does talk about the change from the more divine feminine traditions to the more kind of what we call patriarchal, but not just in the political sense we use it now, but it's really that shift from body-centered towards more mind-dominated, mind-centered traditions. I think, in a certain way, I feel like there is a movement of the consciousness itself, which does move from, one into the other. And I suppose the ideal thing would be, where do we find this balance? And sometimes we don't. And, but so I feel particularly where these traditions were body-centered, and especially because they were led by women, although they were not hierarchical. So when we say, sadly, we have to use words like led, which always means then there's somebody following. But while these women, were like stewards, or they were holding the wisdom, it wasn't like they had held, they kind of denigrated men, or absolutely not. There was an honoring of the divine masculine. The divine feminine is where there is no hierarchy. And there were cultures that existed. We think, how is that possible? You can't have a society that's non-hierarchical. And yet, there are anthropologists that have found that such societies did exist. And it depends on, you have to be able to look at it with the right lens. When we look at it from the patriarchal mind-dominated lens, we only see what we look for. So I feel that because these traditions were not textual, and they didn't have all these big texts, and didn't have big temples and, big sort of buildings, and it was very easy for them to become invisible. These are ephemeral traditions. They're quite fragile. They require a very subtle attention. And Sulini, maybe you could kind of reflect on this as well, but they require a real subtlety of attention. They're not shouting and screaming. In fact, the most ancient invocations of the goddess is avahita, which is dissembling. The goddess is elusive. You know, just today I went for my walk up the mountain, and as I was standing watching the sunset, there was this beautiful red bird hidden in the leaves. I almost didn't see the bird. And then I thought there was this flash of red, and I thought that's just like the goddess. She's elusive, and you have to really be attentive to see these traditions. And when you have, you know, the mind that comes in with, you know, text is important, where are the buildings and where are these, you lose it, you lose sight of it. So Sulini, I mean, you may have something more. Yeah.
I was thinking, even before we had all these mind-led traditions, buildings and things, at the very beginning, it was the dancing body that was the site of all spirituality. So even before we had temples, we had these spaces, sacred spaces where people danced. And it was through the dancing that whoever was watching got this experience of a shift in consciousness, and who got this experience of what it means to be in an expanded state, who saw these divinities as you know, they were understood, abstract concepts. But like what I told you about Rudra, you get to feel these different energies through the dancing body. Through the dancing body, you worship the divine. You share that experience. And even, you know, you have all this iconography that comes much later. Sculpture emerged from dance. Moments that were frozen in dance became sculpture. The different gods, the murtis of the different gods. Temples came much later, and you put these gods in those temples. You had these texts and practices. So you move away from the body as the site of sharing spiritual experience to spiritual experience being housed in these certain spaces. So I think probably that is where that shift, you know, that happened. And then you put the dancers in those temples. And even in very early times, the purpose of dancing was not entertainment. The purpose of dancing was spiritual expression seeking, and the dancer danced for the gods there. But then later, with all these changes that happened, you had the dancers dancing for people who came there, and you know, the whole tradition became sort of debased and lost from its original purpose. And I think that's how we lost these things.
Thank you all. We've got a question from the audience. How do we start a daily practice?
Yes, actually, that is a really important question, because, and I love it, because it is about, yeah, we have to do the practice. Doing simple things like I just shared, you know, just that coming into that multisensorial body. I do share very simple practices on my channels. I mean, coming to the classes, of course, is a way. But if you just want to get a taste of it, I share practices on my social media channels, on Facebook and YouTube, and they're usually very short, simple practices. And what I invite, you know, the people that I work with is, again, not to be rigid and brutal about the practice. One of the core things about dance is this word vinoda, which is enjoyment. It's about enjoying this offering, because you don't want to offer something to the divine or whoever it is that you're suffering and you're brutalizing yourself in offering it. What's the point of that? And even the elephant, right in the midst of his pain, he offers a beautiful lotus. You know, so enjoy it whenever you do it, whenever you feel like doing it, do it with enjoyment, not because you have to get up at 5 a.m. every day in the morning and do it and make that into a something rigid and like an exercise, but enjoying. But even simpler than that, you know, sometimes I invite people that when you go for a walk, try to be not going for a walk because, you know, do other things when you want to exercise, and obviously please, but sometimes take a walk just because you want to meander and just listen, smell if you have the chance to be somewhere where there's you know, woods or nature, just smell, listen to bird song. Beautiful to listen to bird song. So simple. Just listen. Don't have things in your ears. Just listen to bird song and really smell the leaves and the earth, and feel, if you can be bare feet, and if it's safe to be, just feeling the earth, or putting your hand on a tree trunk, just feeling it, allowing yourself that luxury of non-instrumental attention. That is the beginning. That's the soil of a multisensorial body, which is where dance happens. So, and then sometimes closing your eyes and just enjoying that darkness behind the eyes. If it is safe to go out at night, that's beautiful to go. We don't really hardly have the night anymore, because it's all taken up with everything being lit up. But if you can find somewhere where there's some darkness and you can feel reasonably safe, the dark brings everything together. All that separation of the day just melts into this velvet, moving darkness. And then you come into that senses and that multisensorial body. So these are simple things you can do to just come into that intelligence or that aliveness of your beauty. The body is so wonderful in its sensations, and we have these sensations to enjoy the bountiful expression of nature. So that's a few simple things.
Great, thanks, Padma. If there are no more questions in the chat, so we can continue our discourse. I think another question that I had was, about the daily practice, because I mean, a lot of us are, our day jobs are all very in the mind. We can obviously break it up by going on things like walks and, exercising. Is there a way to lean into the body, as you start going into, the rest mode? Because I think, sleep, of course, is obviously you literally give into your body, everything's tired and exhausted. Is there a way you can sort of lean into, come back, return to the body, like before you sort of clock off for the day? Because I find, like, sometimes at night, if you've had a very stressful day or you've been working, it's just hard to switch your mind off. And even when you're lying in bed, you're on your phone or something. So what can we do to return to the body in the evening, especially?
One of the things that I suggested to a woman I'm working with in the individual program, we were invoking the goddess night, Ratri. And this goddess has totally been forgotten. She's hardly ever invoked. Isn't that true, Sulini? Who speaks about this Ratri, the goddess of night? And yet the invocation to her is so beautiful and says everything about why we are where we are now. Because the night is invoked as that goddess that receives us from the day with lots of debts. Debts as in we have incomplete things. We come owing a lot of things. And she weaves us back and returns us to the day. So she weaves us back. So this weaving, so many ancient traditions had weaving baskets, weaving. This weaving was such an important intelligence. How we weave together the mind and the body, the day and the night. And so she's the one. It's the darkness. It's the intimacy of that darkness, that consciousness of night that weaves us back together and restores us back to the day. So what I suggested to this woman I'm working with is to do this little honoring for the night. When the darkness starts to set in, I invited her perhaps to, even if you don't do it every day, once in a while, to just light some candles, not have lights. Think of it as something special, like this beautiful ritual to the night. And to really do whatever movements come to you with this sentiment of, I am fragmented from the day, because that is the nature of the day and the mind. We come with lots of things of, I haven't finished this, I haven't finished that. But we come to the night and we ask her to weave us back, just like a basket is woven back. Ask us to weave us back together while we sleep, so that we can be returned to the day refreshed again. And if we just spend that time, and the other thing I said to her, like I said before, is step out, even if it's for 10 minutes, just outside and be in the night. Just feel that velvet coolness of the night. And, you know, and then come back into the home, carry that sensation with those candles, and allow the darkness to sort of bring you the magic, bring you that mystery, bring you that it's okay not to know, it's okay to be incomplete, it's okay to let go, and it's okay to feel that sense of something, you know, that sense of absence, or the sense of that you're going into this unknown, the unknowable. We are sometimes we're afraid of the night because we're afraid of the unknowability. And so we keep ourselves awake, you know, with our gadgets, with so many things. And we actually have robbed ourselves of the goddess presence in our everyday life is the night. And
So beautiful. Yeah.
So that's, yeah, invoke the night.
Well, I'm definitely going to be lighting some candles after this. We've got another couple of questions. So the next one is, this is the mind and definition at work here. Someone's trying to, ask a question which they think is invoking the mind, but they're seeing parallels between yoga and some of the things that you're saying. What then is the difference between dance and yoga? And I know this is a great debate, but let's get to it. It's obviously one that I think, comes to everyone's mind.
I mean, I can maybe say a few things, and maybe Salini can add, or maybe Sean can add. Both of you, please. I feel like I'm talking a lot. There's a lot to be said, and we probably don't have time to go into the whole of it. And as I say it, I want to say that yoga is also a spiritual practice. It's an important spiritual practice. It has an intelligence, and like all practices do. I mean, that's the thing about holding plurality, is you don't have to compare, and you don't have to, and that is something, as I'm doing this, I say that it's not something I like to do. I don't like to compare, because that is a mind thing, comparing, contrasting, deciding which is better. So holding all things plural, for me, and I do both, I do yoga as well, but dance is my main spiritual inquiry. And the biggest difference is in the way in which dance embraces feelings, sensations, that it is not about withdrawal. Of course, the most important thing of yoga is pratyahara, which is that movement away, withdrawing and coming within. Dance is about embracing sensation, emotion, feeling, archetypes, and expression. That's the second most important thing. Expressing, and how, in an artistic intelligence expression. Yoga is not artistic, creative kind of endeavor. And there's nothing wrong. I'm not saying one is less than the other. I'm just speaking about how they are different. And so dance, that coming into expression, manifesting in a creative way, not just randomly, not as a cathartic expression, but through a creative transformation, that is also a very kind of specific aspect of a ritual practice of dance in this way. Salini, maybe, and Sean too.
Now, what immediately comes to my mind is this feeling that in this day and age and in this world that we live in, how much of a really true practice of yoga, informed by the philosophy of yoga, is possible really, as a physical exercise and as a kind of a stilling sort of process, where you are trying to inhabit the body and be with awareness. Maybe you can, but with its philosophy of total withdrawal from your senses, and I think I don't know how far we can truly practice yoga, but because dance is about bringing all of this experience into your practice, where nothing is to be discarded and there's nothing to be turned away. And yet you can come to a place where you have that, where your mind is still, and you have the experience of wholeness. I think that is a practice that is more easily available for us to do with authenticity. I feel if you're really going to look at a practice in all authenticity, it's easier for people like us. That's what I feel. But if we can always do it as a physical practice, and it definitely does help. And like you, I do yoga. But to really live the life that the Yoga Sutras are asking you to do, how far can people like you and me do it in this world where we are is little, it leaves me a little confused, because I don't know how far we can do that. Yeah.
Sean?
I think I embrace the whole idea of plurality, as you mentioned, Padma. The fact that there are multiple paths to the same goal, but I think what perhaps the question is interrogating is the fact of comparing the multiple paths. Again, it's a mind-dominated inquiry into looking at how these paths compare against each other, which I think can't be done, because they are, in their own essence, a journey that is unique, that has its own integrity. So dance, as we have discussed, offers this ability to cause consciousness shifting by, as we discussed, through these multiple processes of removing the mind dominance. But at the same time, there are other processes that will allow conceptual shifting or consciousness shifting through mind dominance as well. So there are multiple processes, but I think we trying to compare or superimpose one process against the other to see their similarities and differences may not be the best approach, because it's that plurality. All those roads lead in different ways, but their ultimate purpose is the same. That's what I would say, because I practice yoga myself, and we've had this conversation before about how withdrawal works and so forth. So I think it's embracing that plurality, and again, there might be sometimes the opportunity of combining techniques as well. But we have to be mindful. I think it's mentioned as well that the role of a guru or a teacher is in itself the embodiment of that pathway to move to that goal. And therefore we should not be compared, like we shouldn't compare teachers and gurus. We should not be comparing the processes by which we reach the goal as well. That's my take on it.
I want to say a couple of things there, Sean. And just again, I suppose I'm trying to kind of come into that non-linear space. And, I sort of feel like an inquiry doesn't have to be about a goal. And when we say examined life, or an inquiry is life. So, I sometimes I'm a little bit hesitant about that, when we think of all paths leading to a goal, I wonder whether, well, do we need a goal? Because that's again I know what you're saying, but I'm trying to sort of bring it back into that the word inquiry, which is life is an inquiry, and like the rasa, it will change all the time. And so the inquiry and intelligence is, how can you be present to the ongoing unfolding? That was the ancient Sanskrit word rita. It wasn't a rule or a set thing, but it was the unfolding of reality in each moment. And how can you be present to that? And that's where, the ephemeral quality of dance is, that something that you can't hold on to, and it will keep changing. So I suppose that's the offering. And I don't know about combination, because I feel that there is each of these practices, they have an integrity. It's not about dogma, absolutely not. But there is a constellation. Yoga has a constellation. Dance has a constellation. And they are very different. They're very different. And they're different because of the plurality. Thank God they're different. If you have a temperament that is suited for yoga, by all means. And if your temperament is more suited for something like dance, then it's there. But I don't see any good coming out of mixing. And I'm not a purist. As you know, I've done so many different things in my life. But it is about that each constellation comes with a particular reason for it. There is a purpose, there is a nature, there's an intelligence. Yoga as it's like I said. And so I think that, if you're going into something, then you stay with the integrity of that particular constellation. So I myself, I'm not really a great favor of mixing yoga and dance. I feel they're rich in their own way, and they offer very different ways of that inquiry.
Thank you, everyone. I think we've got time for one last question, so I'll ask this one. How does this dance practice of which you speak differ from personal self-expression or the cathartic release of emotions, etc., which is more psychological?
Okay. Again, a really, really important and good question. So in the constellation of dance, we have the ritual mode and the archetypal content in that. And the beginning of dance is something we call yajna. And in fact, it's not the beginning. The whole of dance is yajna. So yajna is the process of offering. And the beginning of that is where you actually say, I am prepared to leave everything I know. It's this intention. It's not a goal. The intention is that when you come into the practice, you are leaving everything you know. And that includes the story about yourself and what you think about these feelings. In all of that, the story of psychology, the story of philosophy, the story of spirituality, everything. And you come in with that intention and you allow the dance, that ritual archetypal content, that intelligence, you encounter that. And that reveals an intelligence to you. So you're not going in there. Your starting point is not, I am coming here with my story and my feelings that I want to work through and I want to get somewhere. But it's like you allow the encounter to bring the intelligence to you. And that can really only happen in its fullest if you hold that intention that I am prepared to be really open. So they say, come with a playful attitude, not childish, but childlike. Leela, the childlike attitude of, I am adventurous, I'm open, I want to discover. So, because the nature of intelligence here is revelation. And nothing is a revelation if you already come in with certain expectations. If you come in with what you already know, if you come in with all that, then it's not a revelation. It's just going to be what you expect. Either you will get what you expect or you won't get what you expected. So it's a very different kind of encounter. And it's not catharsis because, as I said, the offering is always transformed by that artistic, creative intelligence, by that nature of dance. It becomes an expression of beauty, wonder, of something that is like that offering of the lotus flower. So it's very different to the Aristotelian tradition, for example, where it was still using the archetypal content and the deities, but the process was of purging of your emotions as a cathartic process. And it's not self-expression because there is a language of dance that you are embodying. I don't want to say learning because then that's about mastery and getting perfect and all that. But you are receiving a language of dance. That is an archetypal ritual language. It's not just a language of self-expression. It is a particular kind of language of dance. And so at all levels, you are moving into this archetypal ritual expression, which then gives you an intelligence about the movement of your own emotions and feelings in connection with something that is much more bigger than you. That's something more primordial, something more elemental. Sulini?
Yeah, I was just agreeing 100% to what you're saying and feeling that you're putting it so beautifully. Yeah, the first thing you have to do to enter this space is to be emptied of you, the I, and just come there as an empty being, ready to receive this experience. So that it's not about dancing my story. It's about coming there to receive something much larger than this little me, and then in turn, understand more about this little me and how I am situated in this huge scheme of things. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's beautifully put. Yeah. Priyanka, should we just close there?
Yes, I don't think we have any more questions either. So I think
Okay.
now's a good.
So may I just want to say a big thank you to all of you who are here live. Thank you so much for your questions. They were all really reflective, important questions. And I hope that we have helped you in our own reflections. Like I said, it's always quite hard to talk about the dance. Sometimes you just got to do it. And so I want to thank Priyanka. I want to thank Sulini, Sean. I'm so grateful to all of you. Sulini, Sean, you've been my partners in the cave of this dance, and I'm very grateful for that. Priyanka, grateful for your company in my classes and for always being here to help out. Thank you all for listening and being here. I just want to say, if you want to have more information, you can go to my website. It'll come up on as we finish. There's my website, and there are also my social media channels, which you will find on my website. There's information about the different programs I do. So I do group classes and courses. If you're in Australia, they are very convenient. And I also do individual program, which is available internationally, and everything is offered live online. So thank you all again, and over to you, Priyanka.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And I will leave you all with Padma's details. So please do stay in touch and stay tuned for more information on more webinars.